Welcome in, guys. We're going to be talking through Scoop's top 5 for each of the categories. We've got the guns, we've got the value, and we've got the cheapies. And then we'll have some sort of notable mentions that, if you were to go for any of these guys, they could obviously come out and dominate from the start and beat out some of our best picks, obviously. And if you have a guy that you're interested in that's not in this list, that's completely fine. But yeah, super excited to this, and we might try and make this make the same type of video next week as well, guys, which will be plenty of fun. So Scoop, welcome in, mate. And you're in here in the stats center, and you've got a few guys flagged out as some interesting picks. We're going to kick it off with the guns category, mate.
Yeah, well, we've got top 5 of each category, and I haven't necessarily picked them by average or how much money they're going to make or everything or safety, but like sort of a combination of all of those. So obviously, in my top 5 gun picks, Cleary is going to be number 1. There is just so much safety in him. You get what you're going to get. There's probably some risk with Hines. Early season draw is really good for him, but Cleary as your captain and your main guy, it's very hard to go wrong with him. And for that reason, he's just been in my team from day dot and hasn't looked like leaving.
Beautiful, mate. And then with your guns, how many are you looking at this kind of range? How many of these guys are you looking to have in your team?
Yeah, at this stage, I probably am going to have 2 or 3. I might have 3 of these guys, or maybe 2 of these guys and a couple of sort of fringe gun guys.
Cool.
So one of those is a Painhouse type. Someone might go for a Cam Murray instead, perhaps both, and then not end up with as many, like a mid-range half like Fogarty or something like that. So I picked Painhouse just because of his consistent, really good scores. The fact that he plays in Vegas, you can vice captain him if anything happens between now and the next TLT, like a training injury or something like that. You can lock him in and be certain of probably 60 to 65 points without even blinking. So some people are a little off Haas. I personally don't see it that much. If he does struggle a little bit with no Flegler opening up holes, it's going to be counteracted by his super strong, fast early starts. He averages a lot of minutes to begin the year and a lot of points. So either way, even though you're paying 880K, which is 100 more than Murray, you're going to start strong with very safe guaranteed points.
Sure, mate. Robbo from Talking League mentioned, I think he's looking to potentially captain Painhouse just because you get that locked in and out of the way just in case something happens to Cleary. Do you see much merit in that yourself, or can you see that as a good strategy? Potentially a few less points than Cleary, but obviously risk-wise it helps.
Yeah, only I think if Cleary was playing many other opponents, it wouldn't be as much of an option, but he is playing the round 1 Storm, who haven't lost in about 20 years. And so there's argument that Haas can pretty much equal Cleary, especially with that 5 meter skinny field. Middle forwards dominate early season, might even go crazy and put on a spectacle and just push out a really good score for you early on and guaranteed double points without anything annoying happening later on. So the merit is there for keeping that guy locked in and then potentially putting your VC on somebody else and then having like a Hines or a Cleary back in your team when you know for 100% sure rather than 95% sure they're going to be there. I personally think the risk versus reward is pretty easy to go with Cleary because it's only going to be a few points that you lose, in my opinion, because of these matchups. But nearly everybody else will gain those, maybe say 5-10 points on you. So you can do it because the gap's not that much, but I don't know if I'll do it.
I suppose Cleary has the upside, doesn't he? Whereas Haas is, 80? But Cleary has 100 upsides. That's probably the only other main issue with it, I suppose. Mate, next on your list, Harry Grant. You've got there at 788. Talk us through that pick.
Yeah, I had him out of my team for probably about last 4 or 5 weeks until that second week of trials, and he looked really good. He was one of the few guys to score really well during that second week. And you can't read too much into trials, but the eye test with Pappenhausen back and all that was very, very good. And we know that he has done very, very well, and the Storm have done very, very well when Pappenhausen is fit and firing because he offers that much in attack and opens them up. So I think that there is argument to be made, particularly with guys like JMK not doing much at all. Robson not looking tip-top, and Drinkwater doing a lot of dominant playmaking like he was at the back end of last year when Robson wasn't going so good, Grant could be 5 or 10 points clear easily.
Mm.
And locking those early points in could be very crucial. So I'm very happy to take Grant. I've currently put him back in my team tentatively over Robson. One thing, slightly moving over to Robson now. Robson kind of did this last year, missed 6 tackles in the trial, and then still came out strong and averaged like 55 for the first 10 weeks. So there is no guarantee that Grant will be tons better. It's just basically guaranteed that Grant will be the best by a certain amount.
That makes a lot of sense, mate. Leave Murray for now. We got Ponga in there as your number 5 pick. I suppose something interesting with that, if you weren't to go Grant and maybe you went Robson or Brandon Smith or something like that instead, save some cash, and you could get yourself up to Kalen Ponga. Talk to people about why they should start with Ponga.
Yeah, so Ponga is a funny one. He doesn't really work in my team, but I've tried to get him in a few drafts. And that's because we know what he can do at the back end of last year. We've got guys like Latrell, who, yeah, they kick goals as well, but a bit of a tough early draw. And I think 2 buys before Origin or until round 14 or something like that. You've got your Drinkwaters, who started real slow last year and are sort of dependent on the Cowboys a little bit, or him having to do everything. Ponga is basically those rolled into one, and we saw him basically hit 63 last year. So technically, he could be a bit underpriced. His history says he's probably a mid-50s scorer most of the time anyway at fullback, but it means that he is a lot less likely than some others to lose that early season value. Like you sometimes have that risk with those expensive wing fullbacks. And when we've got so few really safe options running around, locking in a Ponga, say, instead of a second strong mid like a Murray, or even dropping like a Fogarty down to a Hutchison, spreading some value and bringing in a Ponga might be really beneficial just because of how well it fits the position.
Definitely, mate. What is your take on that wing fullback position, and then maybe any thoughts on center as well, with how that's going to set up as a structure for your squad and what you suggest other people do?
I think it's very crucial to not just go the value guys, because a lot of the value guys are fantastic, but you also have to have cover for them. You got Pappenhausen, he's great. But you also have Kane Bradley, he's great. What happens when you have them both and they're both missing in round 4? What happens when you've got Keeney and he's missing in round 2 and potentially maybe even gone in round 3 or 4? And all those sorts of guys, suddenly you've got a lot of holes that you're desperately trying to plug, and you might not have enough, or you'll need to bring in someone who you'd rather not. So for me, I'm looking to bring in a good few of those cheap center wing fullback guys, but guys that I'm also happy to have as good cover through that time. And Ponga sort of works in that sort of plan as somebody you can lock into there through those rounds.
That makes sense. Yeah. Do you think it's more of a play that you could go for some of the mid-range type of guys to cover that, and then you've got the cheapie in Weeks or Bradley or whoever it is to cover? Or can you lock in a Ponga and then stuff it with the boss stocks and these types of guys that are cheaper, that you have that one extra cover so you can, in the center and the wing fullback, that you can do that? Is there worth it in that, or are you sort of worried about the potential for those like cheaper guys like a Jacob Gagai and these types of guys to score pretty low and kind of just be annoying, and would you rather just spend up a little bit for some safety?
I am a bit worried about some of those options. So I do think there is value in going those sort of mid-range guys who have some value to lock up a potential low-level keeper guy in those positions, especially if they do have the early season cover. So you've got like your potentially like your maybe Aitken, Simonson, Carraz, Penasini, even Rapner if he manages to keep the full back spot. All those types are quite useful in making sure that you're going to get like 30 points a week with upside to 40, 50, 60, and avoiding like a 12 from Jacob Gagai if he gets strangled with the depleted Souths team in a Vegas with 5 meter shorter sidelines.
Definitely, mate. Any sort of notable mentions, or even maybe a pod or two that you like in the gun section before we move to value?
Yeah, well, I've put Robson there as sort of a fringe gun value guy. He is a lot lower ownership than Grant, surprisingly. But yeah, so he's one guy that is another notable mention. I don't think he's going to do too much wrong. Maybe not tons and tons of value, but he's going to lock in points.
Yep.
Somebody who probably is worth mentioning because he's always up there, Isaiah Yo. The
Yep.
only difference between him and Painhouse is that early-ish buy. Otherwise, I'd have them on close-ish footing. And yeah, I've seen a few teams floating around with Hopgood. I just don't know
Yeah.
if he's quite going to get the minutes. So one to watch for that.
Awesome, mate. Let's move on to the value side of things now, which is scroll down. Awesome. So tell me your sort of general top five picks in the value side.
Yeah, so the number one value mid-range pick, it has to be Brendan Piakur, right? Like we've known what his role is going to be all season, all preseason. He's priced at 29-ish, and we expect him to score 40 or a bit higher than that. His role is 80 minutes. He replaces Capewell. There is almost, I don't want to say almost nothing can go wrong, but there is so much security with him compared to a lot of these other guys who potentially could be better with money making, but their roles up in the air or they have a bit of a downside or a low floor. So I think Piakur is the number one value type pick that you couldn't have in your team because I fully expect him to make 150k minimum, maybe 200, 250k if it goes right.
Yeah. Yeah, I had that in my hot takes. I said he'd make it to 600k by whatever round, and then we'll sell him, I think, before Origin. But that knee injury doesn't help, obviously, does it? Next on your list, mate, who are you looking at?
One that's I think you have to take if he's there. It's a little bit uncertain with this first TLT. Obviously, you've got like your Brandon Smiths, but
Mm-hmm.
who you might want to lock in for your hooker and your mid with the duel. But if they do end up naming just one Eels hooker playing 80 minutes, either Hands or Lussick, I think Lussick at this stage, they're
Mm.
going to make bulk cash. They're going to make probably 45 average or maybe slightly above for Lussick, and
Yeah.
he's priced at 35. That shores up hooker a lot. Maybe it means you don't have to go Grant, but if it doesn't end up working out and they do run two hookers despite some of the earlier preseason comments, then you will have to be scrambling around. So he is very high on my list. And if he's there, absolutely my team. But you just got to have backup plans and safety options like those Piakuras and like those Haases and stuff just to ensure that you're getting somewhere.
Come on, Eels fan. Do we trust Brad Arthur or what?
I want to say yes, but give it Fords, probably yes. Backline, dodgy. So hopefully, fingers crossed, yes. I'm probably set 80% confident we get one hooker still.
That's fair. It looks like we'll get Matto back as well.
Yeah.
In that team, just sounds like he was having some back issues, so he'll be around, and that's probably a small issue on Hopgood's minutes for sure. Mate, number 3 on your list.
Got to be Pappenhausen.
Okay.
He's priced at 36, has averaged 50, north of 50, wherever you want. Even if he doesn't make it there, he's like 10 points of value. Storm's got a rough early draw and a buy. But I mean, if that's all it takes for him to work into the season and sort of, I don't know, trickle up a little bit, maybe to 550k with the first 4 or 5 rounds, then he could just whip up to 700k. He could just whip up, make you all that money, be a keeper. Um, Probably not going to be in the Origin teams,
Nah,
you'd
not this
think.
year. Not this
Not
year,
this
no.
year. So he's just an all-around guy. One of those guys that probably just hasn't left most of our team since the start. I think Pappenhausen and Piakura have just stayed in our teams, other than maybe the Piakura slight injury worry news.
Yeah.
Lussick, if he's there, absolutely has to be in.
Mm-hmm.
Those are probably my favorite 3 locks that have just basically been in my team for weeks and weeks and weeks and haven't thought about moving.
Are these two the next two are your favorites in like the next two favorites in Tupanua and Lukey, sort of at the value price?
Yeah, I think so. Lukey, because we know that his point scoring rate at edge is super high.
Yeah.
Inconsistent,
Mm-hmm.
because he's dropped a couple loans on us last year, but then he also dropped like an 83 in 60 minutes or something. We know this bloke can score fantasy points. If he played 80, we would expect a 55 plus average, and he's priced at 36. So I'm probably banking on him to score mid 40s with 60 minutes, something around those lines. But the thing is, he can go over for a try, he can go over for that big score. And even if he's averaging not quite as much as you want, like maybe he's averaging 44, 45 instead of that 10 points to 46. If he has a ceiling game in there, you've probably just made 60, 70K off that and he's done his dash anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy to take him and hold him until he has that game and then he's done his job and I can take him out again.
That's the big thing with those type of players. Hey, it's that he's at a similar price to someone like Totola, and you're just going to get that same thing. But Lukey could get you like a 39 the first game, then a 48, and then he goes a 70, and you go bang, like his average is now over 50, and it's massive. Yeah. But before that, it can change very quickly with him, which is really cool to own, obviously, and but scary at times as well. Tupua, mate, your thoughts on him?
I was pretty much as shocked as anyone when I saw that lineup. I was not expecting double cheap guys on the edge. It was all speculation of who's one edge and who's the bench one that's going to cannibalize them. And no, Nat Butcher's bench has apparently been training lock throughout the preseason, and now is just sitting there. And we've got two edges. I expect one will probably either we're going to get equal sort of 65, 70 minute splits. And they'll both play that, both be really good value, Wong and Tupanua, or we'll get one that plays 80 and one that plays 50, 60, 65 minutes, and Nat Butcher comes on for a little bit there, I reckon. So for me, my prediction at the moment is that Tupanua could be the 80-minute guy. And then next year, if they shoof off a few players to rugby and stuff like that, then we could see Nat Butcher move into a more full-time middle role rather than taking some edge. But for now, Tupanua is the guy that I'm happiest and slightly more confident in Wong that he'll be there for really good minutes.
Yeah, dual position and a tiny bit cheaper too. There can't be a world with that forward pack that Radley plays 80. There's no need for it, hey?
No.
That makes more sense now. If Butcher's the guy to take some of those minutes for sure. Also, mate, any notable mentions in the value before we get to the cheapies to finish?
Yeah, somebody who, as we were discussing with the centers, somebody that's not 10 points of value, but has some value and does a very strong, solid job in those positions is Will Penasini, I think. So you've got like your Kiraz and your Penasini and like your Owen Aitken, but the one with probably the least worries around their role, or like, will they be named in the right spot? Will there be Lemuel on the bench? Is Penasini. He looked dangerous in the trial. They went right a lot. He was offloading. He was tackle breaking. It was exactly what you wanted to see if the Eels are going to be dominant this year. Moses is going to score well and Penasini is going to score well. He averaged 46 with Moses in the team last year, just because Moses is lovely and dominant on that right side. So if he scores you 46, 47 with that nice early Eels draw, puts his way up to about 650K along those lines. He's shored up that position, scored really strong points, and is probably someone you can carry through a lot of Origin as very, very good Origin round cover.
That's something to note. That's a good point, mate. That these guys in that mid-tier, kind of higher tier value, obviously Penasini closer to a keeper. Hopefully is a keeper this year. That they're not going to play Origin. The Lukies, Penasinis, these types of guys. Tupanua, all guys that aren't going to be in that frame. So there's some extra value on top of that, if you manage to hold them that whole way to the buys, and then you can hold them that little bit longer. That's another little add-on on top, mate. Cheapies now to finish.
Yeah, cheapies to finish. I've got 5 here. You can pretty much like pick 8 or 9. There's a lot of options. These guys are the ones that I think you should probably base a lot of your cheapies around, and then pick 1 or 2 others depending on how your team's structured and how it works and what you're willing to risk. So straight up, you've got your Sam Hughes, huge raps on him, Gus Gould in the preseason, like Preston was last year, Max King the year before. He's 250K, and although we've got some shakeups with Salmon looking like he'll do some lock minutes now and things like that, there's just so much room for Sam Hughes to get good minutes at a good PPM and just make you a safe 150K and move on to an upgrade or another cash cow. Sam Hughes is just one of those guys who's 30% owned for a reason. He's got a very safe role. You'd expect with that forward pack, he's going to get the minutes that he needs in order to be valuable.
Definitely, mate. You mentioned it's going to be Strange all weeks. Is going to be in that spot. So either one, you've got Strange in there. Given was he higher ownership, or he's probably about the same, to be fair?
Yeah, I think Weeks is higher at the moment, but I
Okay.
mean, it all depends who gets named.
Yeah.
And it's going to be one of those two. I think you absolutely have to take whoever's there because, as we've discussed, center and wing fullback are a little bit dire on value and buy coverage. So if we get Weeks, that potentially fixes up some of like the Keeney, Pappenhausen, Bradley, that type of buys,
Yeah.
because you'll have an extra number there. Doesn't guarantee fantastic, awesome scoring, but he's got value. He'll do enough to be worthwhile chucking in your team and being that very good cover as well. Strange, possibly someone you can start in the centers, depending on your team makeup. I'd probably have him as first backup, but he's going to be there, and he'll have half duel as well, which is helpful.
He seems like it might be harder if we do get him. He'll probably score better than Weeks, but Weeks is some nice cover in a pretty tough wing fullback position, which we won't get with Strange. Bradley's obviously contingent on if he's named to start as well. And the good thing with all these guys, except for Trebojevic, is that they're it's only Trebojevic that's locked in this week. All the rest you can change after team list, right?
Yeah, a lot of these are guys who you can just pick the ones that are there and are the best. For me, I think after seeing how it's thrashed out in preseason, Bradley will get a go there for at least a while. And he'll have this very interesting wing fullback second row duel if he does. It's been a while since we've
Yeah.
seen something like that. I think we had Sadragu, we were all raving about for about 2 weeks last year in preseason. And who was it a long time ago? I think Takiaho from the Roosters had front row forward wing fullback duel at one stage when it was
Right.
still front row forwards and seconds rather than mids and edges.
Oh,
Good
how
stuff.
good! How good's he?
Yeah,
I miss that
that'd be
guy.
great.
Ben Trbojevic, mate. How will you play this? Will you look to start him in your centers likely at this point, or would you look to potentially loop with a Tigers guy, a Seb Chris, something like that?
If I buy Ben Trbojevic, I'm probably going to play him
Okay, cool.
because I can lock in one strong center like a Penasini or an Aitken or a Carraz, and I can lock in Ben Trevorrowic's points early in case something goes wrong and we don't get Strange and we get Weeks, for example. If I try and fade Ben Trebojevic because, oh no, Schuster might be back, which very well could be, could trap us a bit. But if Ben Trebojevic isn't in my team and then all of a sudden I can't get Strange in my team, I'm going to need a lot of money to dig myself out of that center hole potentially, or go something a little bit spicy to fix that round one problem, because Chris can't fix it. He's suspended. And really, you've got to start spending up. Maybe we have to do that anyway with bench Voigt in round two. I don't know. But at
Yeah.
least for round one, you know you're going to not have a problem there. And if he manages to stave off Schuster for a little while, he's a starting edge with a dual in center at 250k. There's not too much can go wrong in hope.
Yeah, that's right. You can't do worse than Tommy Talau from last year. Mate, to finish this off, any general thoughts on your structure, like a good structure or strategy that you think is best for this year, or just any sort of finishing touches for this video? Thanks for being on, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think number one priority is go for the value. Getting your salary cap up early to get more maximum points is the name of the game. Secondly, fill in those weak spots that might really hurt you. If you've got like a Jacob Gagai in and you're expecting him in to be in your starting wing fullback reasonably regularly, you might have gunned up somewhere else. Maybe you turned a Fogarty into a Mitchell Moses and are getting 5-10 points extra a week. But what if you get a low floor score and you lose 20 points? So I think you need to have a balance of value, but also avoid too many weak points. You'll have to have some. We only start with a limited amount of
Yeah.
money, but if you can go a little bit safe-ish and leave the spicy guys to either your mid-rangers who will still probably get at least 30 points, or your emergencies, you're probably going to have a better time and get off to a stronger start than otherwise.
Yeah, and I suppose, yeah, if you go a little bit risky and it doesn't pay off, it makes it really tough in that next 3 rounds, because we know how important sort of the trades in 2, 3, 4, and 5 are, right? If you go fairly safe, rank out okay like you did at the beginning of last year, trade well in those first few weeks, you can quickly get in the top 1,000 and in a super good position. Hey,
Yeah, I think I sat at about 6 to 8,000 for a first 3 or 4 weeks. And then straight up after the lucky guys that early on happened, I think I got to top 1,000 only about, or like 1.5K only about 3 weeks later. You make
Yeah.
up a lot of ground if you've got that platform to jump from.
Yeah, exactly. You don't make all those, a few mistakes. Obviously, a few mistakes is fine, but one or two extra on top of that for guys that aren't really making money, it slows down a lot of things for your team. Mate, really appreciate you jumping on for this one. I think it'll help people, and people are very interested in your opinion, obviously, as well, having done so well last year. You and Matty Thompson super close to each other in rank last year, so it's good to have him on, and great to have you on weekly here as well. So thanks, mate.
Have a good one.